Thank you, Desiree. Hi, I'm Cindy Greenglass. Thanks for joining us in the session with Ruth Stevens, who really doesn't need to be introduced if you were just in our last session, where you heard her on the panel. She's the co-host of the Marketing Horizons podcast. She's extremely well-known business-to-business marketer, a close personal friend and colleague of mine who I admire greatly and I consider my mentor. But I will read the official bio. Ruth consults on customer acquisition and retention for business-to-business clients. She teaches at marketing at NYU Stern and at business schools abroad. She just got back from Poland, and she's on her way to Bangkok teaching, and we're really fortunate to have her with us here. She has been named one of the 100 most influential people in business marketing by Crain's B2B magazine, and one of 20 women to watch by Sales Lead Management Association. She serves as a member to fledgling companies at the ERA Business Accelerator in New York City, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you again today to Ruth Stevens. Take it away.
Really happy to be here today. I noticed in the Kahoot yesterday that when the question came up, what kind of marketing do you want to be doing or are you doing today, that B2B was not on the list, meaning nobody mentioned it. Sorry, what did you say?
Never is.
Never is, yeah. And the sad fact is that, to my mind, the happy fact is that B2B revenue, the B2B nut, is twice as big as the consumer nut in the world. The sales generated by business-to-business selling is twice as big as consumer, believe it or not. And when you think about it, that sort of makes sense because any consumer transaction is undergirded by probably 10 to 20 business-to-business transactions. If you're making a hairdryer and you're selling it to a consumer household, there were 18 B2B transactions underneath there before the hairdryer was manufactured and distributed down to the drugstore where the consumer bought it. So you kind of get the concept. And the other reason that I think B2B is rarely offered in business schools is that we're all consumers, so this is what we're familiar with as individuals, and we're not exposed to the idea until we get into the career world or the real business world as people. And we find, I have from my kind of MBA student universe, I find that well over 50% of people who graduated, whom I taught, end up in business-to-business environments. So they all want to go to Wall Street, right? They're in institutional investment. They want to go into tech. Thank you, Brandy. They end up in B2B environments. So who's my John Deere friend? Ryan, we were talking about this last night. So I feel like I'm here today to persuade you that there's a lot of fun and drama available to you in focusing on business to business. Cindy and I both have worked in this field for more than 20 years each, and we have a ball. So I feel like I'm sort of a proselytizer here. So let me begin by first seeing whether the clicker is working. Like the mic, not getting, okay. So here's what I want to share with you today. I've got 3 kind of modules, if I could say so, that I'm going to introduce to you. First, I'm going to try to show you what are the key differences in business markets compared to consumer markets. And then I'm going to introduce 3 cool new technologies that are not unique to B2B, but are highly valuable in B2B and kind of changing the way we go to market. And 5 new strategies. They're not all necessarily new, but they're all working like crazy today. And then I'm going to talk about branding, because I know you study branding in the world, and B2B marketers think about branding differently. speaking of branding, Brandy, would you agree that the concept of a brand is, now marketers think differently in business markets, right? So I want to just explain how it's different. So let's start with the first topic of how B2B is different. How B2B is different. So couple of key points. The goals of B2B marketers are completely different from consumer. And you look at this data, I know this is hard to read. Is this too hard to read, right, Ryan? So I'll tell you what it says. The typical job of a B2B marketer is to generate sales leads for a sales force. You're nodding and smiling. I'm so happy to see that. There are lots of other jobs in B2B, but perennially, when surveys are done, what do you need from us? Our internal customers say, leads. I need leads. So we got to give them to them. And we have to give them not only just leads, they have to be qualified leads so that when a salesperson follows up on the lead, they have a prayer of closing a deal. Yes. And so just throwing crap at the salesperson. The whole role of the reason that B2B companies invest in marketing, I mean, they can get revenue from the sales team, but the reason that they invest in marketing is to generate productivity, additional leverage from the constrained resource that is represented by the sales team. So it's all about leads. Now, communications media usage is also quite interesting in B2B. Just this year, for the first time, social media pulled ahead from ahead of email for the first time as the #1 outbound communications media channel, which took us all by surprise. I'll tell you personally, 15 years ago, when I would advise clients, I would say, don't bother with Facebook. Now I say, bother with Facebook. So things have changed a lot. Yeah, please.
What source are you quoting?
Yeah, this comes, I'm sorry, it's fallen off. This is from a study from Sage Frog, a 2022 research report. Yeah, it's on the slide. And by the way, I've made these slides available in a PDF form, and it will be available. Please do. Don't bother taking any notes. The slides will be distributed. And then thinking about budgets, we don't advertise in B2B. Well, we do a little bit, but it's not about big awareness numbers. A typical business seller has an entire universe of prospects of, probably less than 10,000 companies. And, if you're selling telecom or you're selling business services, you might be able to sell to everybody, but most businesses are selling to a very limited universe of prospects. So mass advertising is not being used. What is being used is business events. You'll see, like Cindy, your clients have had huge event budgets. Does this surprise you that the largest line items in a B2B marketing budget are website development and digital marketing? Not really clear what they mean by digital marketing here, but social media and branding is sort of #4. It's a different world, a different mindset. And the reason is that business buyers are different from consumers, and business buying is different. So I've got 3 kind of key differences listed here, and we'll talk a little more about each of these. But business buyers, they're still human beings, but they're buying on behalf of a company. So they have to be able to, they can't do any impulse buying. It's less about emotion, although emotion can help with our messaging, but they have to be able to justify the sale internally to their bosses and to the CFO, and why did you choose this vendor over that vendor? Well, here's the data. Here's why we made that decision. The other interesting thing is, so what we need to give them as marketers, we need to help them justify the purchase decision from our company. So we need to give them facts and testimonials and justifications that help them persuade, the powers that be that our solution is the right one for them. But they're still human beings, so we can use humor, we can use emotion to capture and build a relationship with them. And then the third one is they are only part of the process. Business buying is done by a committee. Look at this number. Only 7% of industrial purchases are made by a single individual. We have to know who is on that committee for that product, and we have to have a relationship with all of them. And that's why people like Cindy and me get excited about B2B, because it's so complicated. A B2B sales cycle can be as much as 2 years. So we have to know who's on the buying committee, what motivates them, who they are, how to get in touch with them, what their role is in the committee, and we need to stay in touch with them over that buying cycle period, 2 years. So this means marketing is really important in the category. So these are the committees I was talking about. Sometimes they're called the buying group, the buying committee, the decision-making unit, whatever, but they include different roles like the specifier, the end decision maker, that's the boss who kind of authorizes the purchase. There are influencers in there. There are end users, the person who's actually going to use the software or put the raw materials into the factory, or who wants to make sure that they're going to work in our processes. Each of these roles has a different, here's the roles on the left. Each of these people has a different goal, a different agenda. So that means as marketers, we need to understand what their role is. Not only do we need to know how to get in touch with them and what their role is, we need to understand why they are, on what criteria are they going to make the purchase decision. And this means, gosh, buying committees can be as many as 20 people or more, with all these different roles. And we have to speak to them differently based on what they care about. So here's an example of, if we tried to write 20 different messages into the firm to 20 different job roles, this would be tough. Often we break it down to business buyers versus technical buyers. And here's some examples of the types of values or messages that we might make to each, what they really care about. The technical buyer wants to make sure it works. And the business buyer wants to make sure there's going to be a payoff. That's sort of where we are. And I've got a great example of this from Avaya. Any of you familiar with Avaya? They're the telecom hardware company. It's almost all B2B. They make these phone systems for businesses. Wasn't it part of AT&T originally? I'm pretty sure. And so here's an agency called the Kern Organization that developed 2 different messages, one for the technical buyer, one for the business buyer. And look at how the headlines are different. See that? The one on the left, they're talking about how you're not going to have any downtime with our solution. And the business buyer is your staff is going to be more productive. Same product, different message. Isn't that sort of fun? And so in the world of marketing communications, this is a really exciting challenge, or at least I think it is. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so let's dive into the 3 technologies that I wanted to share with you. We're going to talk about chatbots, data linkage, and CTV. So let's look at the first one. I've picked 3 technologies that are kind of hot, but mostly that they are productive in B2B today. So the first one, chatbots, I'm sure, I know consumer marketers are using chatbots like crazy today, but what B2B marketers are doing with chatbots is really exciting. There's so many applications. The AI is so much better than it was even 6 months ago, and the applications are huge. Look at this. On the left, I've got a little box with 8 different ways that B2B marketers are applying chatbots. They're basically using it as a so-called top of funnel enabler. You can use it to collect the company name and the email address even before you've even, you don't even have to have them fill out a web form. You can actually find out who's visiting and kick off an ongoing relationship with these website visitors inside the chatbot. That's pretty great. Drift is one of the, any of you familiar with Drift? I think it's still pretty much in the B2B world, but they have taken chatbot technology to really the highest level I've seen today. I'm sure competitors will be coming along, but right now they're sort of the bomb. Let's look at the next category of cool new technologies. This might creep you all out a little bit, but there are services today. I'm particularly familiar with Stirista, a data company in San Antonio, that takes all the business records in the country and all the consumer records in the country and marries them together so that now I can take my business buyer list, basically, or the data that I have in my contact database, my CRM system, I can send it to Stirista, and they will give me, probably at the rate of about 20 or 30%, you're not going to get a 100% match, they will give me that individual's consumer record, the consumer email, the consumer address, maybe even the name might be different. So now I have personal insight into my business contacts. And what can I do with that? A lot. Well, let me show you an example from Stirista. They were doing some work for Weight Watchers that sells, I don't know if any of you have this in your company. Weight Watchers will create an inside company program to help us all take off a few pounds as employees. And usually it's the HR department that decides to bring Weight Watchers in, run the program, and Weight Watchers will give all the participants a discount, and it's really a nice perk for working at a company. So the marketing department at Weight Watchers is always trying to sell into HR professionals. They've been mailing and emailing and calling HR professionals for a long time, so they're really familiar with the expected response rates, but the response rates were starting to decline. They contacted Stirista, who appended the consumer record to those HR people, they're business people, right? And cherry-picked the HR professionals who had a personal interest in fitness and sports and other related categories, and they doubled the response rates by better targeting based on the personal interests of HR people. And there are a million other examples, but I thought you would like that. Any questions? You finding this boring? No. There, Mark Schaefer. Thank you. All right, so here's the third new technology, connected TV. Any of you trying out connected TV? I sort of kind of pitched it in the earlier session. This is so cool. Do you know what it is, you guys? First of all, it's growing like crazy. I'm not crazy, but at nice, steady, projected growth. The connected TV is advertising on streaming services, and there are 3 types right now. There's, Hulu type subscription-based. Hulu, Netflix, we pay monthly. Then there's all the linear TV networks like, what's it called? NBC. Started Peacock, right? Now they're trying to charge us for streaming services on Peacock. And then there are ad-supported apps like Pluto. Anybody familiar with this? So there are kind of these three categories now, and I'm sure other categories are going to come along, because really for marketers, oh boy, this is a playground. We can target the power of television advertising with all of its visual excitement, its movement, its music, to specific individuals in specific households. And it means that we can also test it really small. So because video production value expectations have declined, you can get away with a pretty cheap TV. We're all making videos now. You don't have to have these expensive TV ads produced by big agencies. Just try an ad and test it for really affordable prices. The ROI is unbelievable. You're getting impactful messages, and you're reaching, in the B2B world, decision makers at home on their sofas through this kind of linking that I was talking about with the consumer records. So here's sort of how it works technically. You have to have the business to consumer linkage, but then you can find that individual on his various devices through a combination of IP address and device IDs. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Really cool. Okay, so let's dive into the 5 strategies. I want to make sure we have time for questions. I'm going to begin with e-commerce. Do you guys see e-commerce as a B2B application?
Yes.
What can you sell through e-commerce to a business?
Everything is sold through e-commerce. B2B e-commerce is a $1 trillion industry.
I paid her to say that. Thank you, my dear. Great, so let's look at how that works. Because most of us, when we think of e-commerce, we think of mail order, or what used to be called mail order, but we think of buying stuff and having it shipped to us. But B2B e-commerce is different because, buying stuff is, a single individual. Remember, only 7% of industrial sales are done by a single individual. If you're trying to get 20 people to agree to make a purchase online, it just doesn't really fit. But there are tons of ways that we can apply e-commerce to the go-to-market of business to business. And this is why, thank you, Bonnie, you mentioned it's a $1.8 trillion category, and it's growing at 10% per year. Holy mackerel. What else is growing at 10%? That's pretty great. So the big secret of e-commerce and B2B is that it's being used at different points in the buying process. So it's used at the very end, it's used by the procurement people to place an order. At the very beginning, it's being used at the beginning of the buying process. It might be used for sending a sample or scheduling a demo or something. And there are also so-called marketplaces like Amazon and Alibaba are coming up with real, services and products for B2B buyers. And then, of course, governments are saying now, you have to buy through our procurement system online. We don't want to see a salesperson, forget it. So there's a lot of e-commerce action these days in B2B. It's very exciting.
It's the specification process. That's what people don't realize with B2B.
Yeah, explain.
From a chain perspective, you're a Panera Bread corporate.
Right.
And you have 10,000 locations.
Yeah.
You want to lock down your 10,000 locations that are businesses to buy what you decided as a company to buy. from other
Right,
businesses.
right, because businesses have multiple layers. They're doing work on a global basis. They've got regional offices. It's really complicated and therefore more fun, right, Cindy? Okay, so the second strategy that I wanted to introduce, if you hadn't heard of it, is called account-based marketing, or ABM. This has been around for about 5 years, and it's basically boiling down to what they call flipping the funnel. Let me just jump to this next. This is the traditional sales and marketing. You throw a lot of prospects in the top, you contact a lot of people at the top of the funnel, and then you kind of work them down to a real sale at the bottom of the funnel. The difference with ABM is that you identify your top prospects at the beginning, and then you work them and you ignore everybody else. You don't invest in everybody else because, as I said earlier, not everybody's a prospect in B2B, and you want to spend your money wisely. So back to this thing, the great thing about ABM is not only that you reduce waste dramatically, but you also get the sales team and the marketing team to work together, which is no small accomplishment. And so the salesperson is calling into the account, the marketing person is adding more value by developing communications to nurture and deepen the relationship in that account, and also to find out who's in the buying committee and doing all that research and developing the relationship before they're ready to buy. So here are some examples of some of the tactics that marketing can contribute to the whole process in an ABM environment. It's pretty exciting. Any of you have any ABM experience? Yeah, do you want to tell us about it?
We do a combination of both. So we have,
No, please.
we do have general sales, and they do the original funnel. Then we have key accounts. So we picked out the top 10 accounts within this specific.
Exactly.
We have 2 people who they're targeting the specific buyer that's specifically we're looking for.
Right,
Growing their
great.
sales both on a regional and global basis.
I'm so glad you brought up the concept of key accounts, because in B2B, the 80-20 rule, we used to say this, Brandy, at IBM, the 80-20 rule is more like the 98-2 rule, where 2% of your customers represent 98% of your revenue. And this is why businesses tend to set up key account strategies. Mostly large enterprises where we're going to get a lot of business from, and we try to maximize that opportunity. So, and could you share us a couple of ABM stories from?
Yeah, Ruth, I was just going to say, I mean, my business has been, we're a small business, but we've been selling software for 25 years.
Wow.
E-commerce, and
Cool.
even as a small business, using ABM path-based is key for us to try and go out as we see the market change. Now we can go out and look what used to be maybe a company that has less than 10 employees. Now we can hit the 50 to 100 employees through some ABM rather than, like you said, a shotgun approach.
Right.
And it's much more cost effective that way.
Yeah, it's really the elimination of waste is just so attractive. Okay, let's look at the third strategy. We've talked about ABM, we've talked about e-commerce. Now it's time to look at retention marketing. Now let me ask you, what do you think, looking at the B2B marketing budget, what do you think a marketing department is spending on current customer marketing or retention marketing compared to acquisition or lead generation marketing in B2B? What's your guess, you guys?
10%.
10? 25? Do I hear? No. Any other estimates?
Retention, 50?
50? Oh.
Why not?
No, I'm loving what you're saying. The truth is, Drum roll, please. The truth is it's about 15%. So they're halfway between what the two others said. I think this is criminal. Myself, no, let me put it this way. I think this is misguided. Really, where do all of our profits come from? Current customers, right? Upselling, cross-selling, deepening the relationship. And in business to business, there's even more opportunity because I sold into this department. Let me go find other divisions. Oh, I sold to them in Europe. Now let me try to sell to them in Asia. It's still the same corporation, but oh my God.
Ruth, I was gonna say, I think that's gonna change with the subscription model. So if you look
Here,
at
here.
companies like Microsoft that have now forced everyone into the cloud, it's a subscription model. And
Right.
we want to minimize churn. And so what I'm seeing is that companies are looking at upping that is more of a focus. Because I agree with.
I agree too. And
But I think that's gonna shift.
And thank you for making my point for me, because it is changing. This is where I wanted to go with this. And the COVID also nudged it along. Remember this, retention is the new acquisition. And this is especially heard in the halls of B2B because we couldn't go on sales calls anymore. So we said, well, geez, if we can't go to events and we can't schmooze with our prospects, let's focus on our current customers. We already have a relationship with them, and maybe we can get more business from those guys.
I'd like to make a slight distinction here.
Okay.
In a lot of B2B commerce over the last 10 years, in that within the customer experience, within that hybrid experience, which includes some automated touch points and transactions, as well as sometimes as a chatbot, sometimes they have to go to human.
Yeah.
Within that, I think, as we used to call it post-purchase reinforcement, a lot of the software that I worked with, half of it is retention. And so for salespeople, that may be true, but in B2B e-commerce, and I'm not sure how that number was sliced and diced, but for a lot of companies, because renewing that procurement contract that could be billions of dollars in some
It's
cases.
very similar to what you were saying.
So they're spending
And-
actually more than half of their marketing
Yeah,
dollars.
no, I agree. But let me pull you back to the chart that talked about the goals of a marketing department in B2B, and it was all about acquisition. And if you look at this slide here, here's that same Sage Frog 2022 report where the marketing objectives were listed and retention is missing. And so one of the reasons behind this, as Bonnie pointed out, is that the marketing department is charged primarily with acquisition. And who's in charge of deepening a relationship with an existing customer? It's a sales function. So, but I'm making this point again and again, that those salespeople need help from marketing because they can't be calling into every customer every day. They need marketing communications to deepen that relationship, do the research to understand what their needs are, their changing needs, how can we serve. And this brings me to my next point, which is what is retention in B2B? It's actually the role that a great salesperson plays when he or she is managing the account. They usually have a function called account management. It usually reports into sales, and I said earlier, it could use more help from marketing, but a great salesperson understands that people buy from people they like and respect and trust, and we need to adjust our selling to their needs. So this is why salespeople take customers out on the golf course, because that's where they can get to know them and find out their spouses' names and their children's ages and all that relationship building. So I'm expecting, as you said, to see more and more focus on retention from the marketing side, hoping for it. Okay, number 4, hybrid events, like our buddy David Meerman Scott said the other day on our podcast that hybrid events are the new reality in business events. And I've seen companies that spend the bulk of their marketing budgets on events. This is how they get business. They all fly into a certain city, and all their customers and prospects are flying in too. They spend 3 days schmoozing with these people, and those become their new customers. But with COVID kind of putting a damper on face-to-face events for 2 years, we started to get pretty good at event marketing online, and now we're going to go to this hybrid route. It's just not going away. But one really cool new development or strategic approach has come out of COVID, and that is the rise of the proprietary event, where when events were all face-to-face, running a proprietary event, meaning we own it, we developed it, we manage the invitation list, we are the sole exhibitor, and we get to decide who comes, and it's usually our customers and prospects, was so expensive that it was really limited to only the largest enterprises. Like Salesforce.com has a massive face-to-face event called Dreamforce, maybe you've heard of it, and IBM has a number of proprietary events, and nobody else could really afford it. But now, thanks to hybridization and virtual events, we can actually build and own our own events, and the advantage there is that we own the show and we own the relationship. We don't have any competitors there unless we want them for some reason, like maybe channel partners or something. So this really goes to what Mark Schaefer was saying yesterday. We want to build trust. We want to humanize. We want to have face-to-face relationships. And one of the coolest kind of side angles on this is number 2 here. Have a look at this. Small group meetings, often peer-to-peer, invitation only, where you can get really senior business decision makers to come because they want to meet their peers. They don't want to meet you so much, maybe. Maybe they'll be grateful to you for having developed it, but you'll be sprinkling in there peers who are your current customers who will in effect give you testimonials at the event. These small group invitation-only events are really, really productive and relatively inexpensive. I'm pretty excited about that. And then there's, of course, online communities that we could talk about more later.
Just to speak to this, so we just had our large proprietary event on May 10th.
What was it called? Think,
Like
right.
IBM.
Think, IBM, I get it,
Right?
yeah.
So it's had many iterations over the years, but that Think.
Yeah.
And because of everything, we decided to go from the 30, 40,000, obviously pre-COVID, to this very small, invite only,
Yeah.
intimate, in a hotel ballroom, which is something that we normally don't do. What I will say, we learned many things shifting to this new trend. But what I will say to what you're saying here, we took some things into consideration, we took some things not so much into consideration. Virtual, people really, really like virtual. They don't have to travel, they don't have to go places. So while you want to deploy small groups, there's some people, especially your high performing clients, who just did not want to come. They just didn't want to go to Boston, or not anything against us. They just send me the link and I'll join.
Yeah.
Well, there's no link. Okay, well, where's the link? So what we ended up doing is we had Think in person, and then we created Think Broadcast,
Cool.
which was a virtual, and we made Think Broadcast free for anybody
Good.
to join, and if anybody wants to go, all of the Think Broadcast is still online at no cost. You can watch on demand or what have you. So this idea with the trend, there's a hybrid. You're gonna have to figure out a balance between, because of what people now are used to, or what they like, or what they
Right.
prefer. So I agree with own the event, but you have to own the event to design the event for the people you want to come.
Here, here. Couldn't agree more. Now let's move on to the fifth strategy, and this is video. Oh my God. Video has exploded just in the last 3 years in B2B, to the point, see in the lower left, that LinkedIn is allowing us to create our own videos inside our profiles. I haven't done that yet. Have any of you created a little audio or video self-introduction on your LinkedIn profile? Yeah, was it fun?
Yeah, I did it yesterday.
Very cool, very cool. You're ahead of the curve. And then, you know, lots of different formats or kind of strategic approaches down here in the right, and some of the use cases you can see listed there. Video is being valued across the entire funnel. And here's some examples. And I also have found that business sellers are getting a lot more creative and kind of crazy with video now. It's not a talking head, oh, we can testify that this is the greatest sliced bread, but they're starting to really kind of act like consumer marketers in developing the video content and trying to engage business buyers in a new way. So I've got Desiree. Do you think that, where's Desiree? All right, so my entire team, let's see. I brought along a video example of a company, it's actually Adobe Marketing Cloud, that created a fun video that I thought was sort of breakthrough. You don't really see this. And this is from a couple of years ago, you'll recognize. So let's see if the sound is working. I think the sound was not working, in which case I'll just ask you to watch it online yourself. This.
Peter, come take a look at this.
Mr. Daniels.
Mr. Daniels.
Look at this. What's this?
The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
The clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
I need more trees. More, please. I'll get you more trees. Hey, take a look at wood pulp. Whoa, everything you got wood pulp right now.
He really loves that thing.
Isn't that great? So, you know, that's fun, right? Business to business is going crazy. Okay, so let me just wrap up with my little pitch on branding and why it's different, how we think about it differently. Branding in B2B is not about mass awareness. It's about getting a foot in the door for a salesperson, really, is really what it boils down to. And so I'm reminded of this amazing ad in the 1980s from McGraw-Hill magazines, a huge trade publisher in the day, who created this ad trying to sell the idea of advertising in trade pubs to get you the awareness you needed in your target audience. So if we're advertising in Metals Monthly, then very likely when a salesperson tries to get an appointment with a metals buyer, if they've heard of us in their trade pub through print advertising, they're more likely to take a meeting. And that's really kind of what it boils down to. So we also find that branding, emotion works in B2B, despite everything we were taught 20 years ago about we have to be rational, we have to give them enough facts, and we have to help them to persuade everybody else in their company that they're making the right decision by picking us as the vendor. But it really turns out that it's a human think, oh, thank you, Mark Schaefer. It's a human thing. That B2B relationships are also based on trust. Can you imagine being the person who is making a purchase decision and they decide to buy so say I need to buy silicon wafers from a supplier because they're part of my manufacturing process, and I end up with a vendor who doesn't deliver on time, and my factories are shut down, and I'm not meeting my quotas, I can't sell properly. Trust and reliability are the bedrock of a successful B2B relationship, just like in consumer, but on a vaster scale. And this is where marketing can help. So I hope you've all found some of these ideas worthwhile. I'm including in the PDF a list of some of the best writing to keep on top of what's going on in B2B marketing. These are some of the blogs that I read. I also included my own on the bottom, of course. And I'd also ask you to maybe send me a LinkedIn invitation if you'd like to stay in touch with me. And I thank you for listening today. And now I'm going to go tell Mark Schaefer that you weren't bored. Thank you, Desiree. So I think we're maybe have a few minutes, or do you want to wrap up now?
We do one or two questions if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm open. Anybody want to raise a point or ask a question? Please.
So you mentioned hybrid events. I wonder if it's really specific to industry. In the beginning when COVID happened, we had tons of people registering for webinars.
What's your business?
I'm in the food safety industry.
Food safety, great.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was great. We got great numbers, great response, sales loved it.
Hmm.
And then over 3 years now, basically, things are dying down. And we're not getting the same people, the same response. We're even doing proprietary stuff, invite only, peer-to-peer, exclusive chat. And talking with some of our media partners and some of our competitors.
Yeah.
They're finding the same thing. And so like, how do we, and now I'm hearing Zoom fatigue. So I like the idea of hybrid events. I like the idea of virtual stuff, but how do we keep it going, I guess, if it's not working in certain industries?
Yeah, well, any media channel has a life cycle, right? Email was the greatest thing, and now everybody hates it. So there are cycles, and virtual events had a lot of excitement during COVID, but now that we're going back to face-to-face events, we're not doing them as much. So we have to accept a certain amount of kind of maturity there, and then try to make them as jazzy and fun as possible. That's really all I can get. Hire a new agency. Any other? Did you want to ask something?
I
Or
wanted to say, Ruth, I'm going to come down and hug you in a little bit because in 2009, I kept telling Chad in the program, we need to do more with B2B for the marketing because that's what I worked in when I was going through the program. It was difficult to try and bridge that gap, and it is very different. The personas that I worked as a buyer and I worked on the marketing side, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So for those of you that don't think of B2B because it's not cool, and I work in technology too, and it's a lot of fun. And I would just advocate to definitely give it a career thought.
thank you.
Here, here.
Woo, woo, woo.
Yeah.
Thank you all.